Robert Moses was a student nonviolent coordinating committee field secretary and director of SNCC 1964 Mississippi Summer Project. He was instrumental in the formation of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, a group that challenged the regular Democratic Party delegates from the state of the party's 1964 convention. Dr. Moses taught math for a time at Lanier High School in Jackson, Mississippi, and used the school as a laboratory school for the algebra project methods. He is the author of Radical Equations, Civil Rights from Mississippi to Algebra, to the Algebra Project. Sir, it's an honor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to start right in. In March of 1963, a field secretary for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, I testified in the Federal District Court of Judge Claude Clayton in Greenville, Mississippi. My lawyer, John Doerr, from the U.S. Department of Justice. A few months earlier, Jimmy Travis, Randolph Blackwell, and myself had been grease-gunned on the highway outside of Greenwood. Jimmy, driving, caught a bullet in his neck. In response to this terrorist act, SNCC converged on Greenwood, raised food from Chicago, and insisted that families needing food join the right to vote insurgency, march with SNCC to the courthouse, and attempt to register. Greenwood police arrested and jailed 8 SNCC field secretaries. From the witness stand, I stared at the sharecroppers bust in from Greenwood while attending to Judge Clayton's constitutional question. Why is SNCC taking illiterates down to register to vote? Because the nation can't have its cake and eat it too. It can't use politics to deny black people access to literacy and then turn around and say they can't do politics because they're illiterate. Today, more than 50 years later, a contemporary SNCC action might provoke a contemporary constitutional question. Why is SNCC taking convicted felons down to register to vote? In that 1963 Mississippi Federal District Court, and in 21st century America, 3 sets of constitutional combatants engage each other in a power struggle for the right to vote and the right to a quality public school education. Federal power, state power, and people power. 3 powers which have struggled with each other across each of 3 constitutional eras. Each of these eras has a distinctive badge. We can see this in the fate of young black men across the 3 eras. 1787 to 1862. In the first constitutional era, young black men are Africans and constitutional property, too valuable to lynch or lock up. 1875 to 1941. In the second constitutional era, Southern young black men are second-class citizens, rounded up by the tens of thousands for peonage and shackled to work the coal mines. In this, our third constitutional era, mass incarceration, fueled by President Nixon's determination to create a war on drugs as a tool to destroy the black community, intensified under the Clinton and Obama administrations, decimated the potential black electorate. The National Democratic Party, authors of all 3 devastations, cannot claim innocence, because as Baldwin taught us, it's not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. That said, we are calling on the National Democratic Party to address with us a fundamental question. Who are the constitutional people? What does it mean to be a constitutional person in the United States of America? On April 22nd, 1820, at the center of the first constitutional era, Thomas Jefferson wrote this to John Holmes about slavery. But, as it is, we have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is in one scale, and self-preservation in the other. In that era, Democrat presidents decimated Native Americans, confiscated their lands, and rode the wolf of slavery. Young black Africans, insurgent runaway slaves, inspired a revolutionary people's movement to destroy the wolf of slavery, pushing Abraham Lincoln to begin his 1868 House divided speech with reflections on the two-letter word that in this very election cycle continues to confound this nation. If we could first know where we are and whither we are tending, we could better judge what to do and how to do it. Alas, Lincoln could not construct a we. The nation fractured and descended into war. It took its own sweet time, but Democrats fractured over the same two-letter word when 1 century after the Civil War Freedom Summer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, MFDP, pushed the National Democrat Party to cleanse itself from the politics of white supremacy. MFDP had come from the right state. George S. Boutwell, a senator from Massachusetts, who helped craft the Reconstruction Amendments and laws to enforce them, stated the case. The evidence shows that the state of Mississippi is at present under the control of political organizations composed largely of armed men whose common purpose is to establish and maintain, by acts of violence, fraud, and murder, the supremacy of the white line Democrats. In 1875, a decade after the Civil War, a Democratic Party's white line democracy launched the nation into Jim Crow and slavery by another name. Black youth dropped the curtain on this second constitutional era. They initiated and sustained the sit-in movement, took it across Alabama and into Mississippi with freedom rides, then settled via SNCC across Mississippi and the Black Belt to organize an earned insurgency for the right to vote. They acted as constitutional people, citizens of the nation, in defiance of the nation's Confederate narrative and its idea that their human rights depended on something as shaky as the laws of the Confederate States, a notion as absurd as slavery itself. They enacted a people's narrative, a story involving guarantees of national citizenship and national protection of citizens' rights. In this, our third constitutional era, our questions remain. Who are the constitutional people? What does it mean to be a constitutional person in the United States of America? While those who fought for the Reconstruction Amendments thought they were guaranteeing the right to vote to all citizens, those rights have been deeply undermined by, among others, this Democratic Party. In 1963, Judge Wisdom of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals had this to say about the removal in 1877 of federal troops from the South. These events foreshadowed the lily-white primary and marked the emergence of the Democratic Party in the South as the institutionalized incarnation of the will to white supremacy. In Shelby County v. Holder, Chief Justice Robert elevated a Confederate narrative of states' rights over a people's narrative of universal citizenship, providing a judicial facade for the contemporary will to white supremacy. To reinforce the intent and purpose of the Reconstruction Amendments and to ensure that all of our citizens, including incarcerated persons, have full political rights, the SNCC Legacy Project and those of us who commit to organizing earned insurgencies of people power champion, in opposition to Chief Justice Roberts, a people's narrative, that the nation rejected both slavery and its assault on human dignity and altered its slave-tolerating constitution to give the federal government power to protect the people's rights. We ask that the National Democratic Party take a revolutionary stance, confirm the right to vote, and make it explicit. Adopt in your platform the following statement. The National Democratic Party agrees to work for the following voting rights resolution. Voting rights resolution, Section 1. The people's right of representation being necessary to our Republican form of government, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be infringed. Section 2. The federal branches of government shall protect this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Moses, I want to thank you for being here. We're going to hear a question from Cornel West in a minute. But let me just say this, that we really appreciate you being here. In other forums, I've said to the panel, this is a moment, this drafting committee is a moment where we can put our fingerprints on the future of America. And there's so many things that you could be doing, but you're here trying to make sure that we move towards that more perfect union. And it's a shame that we have to keep fighting the same fights over and over and over again. But thank you for being a soldier in the Army for that more perfect union. Yes.
No, I just wanted to highlight the fact that our dear brother Robert Moses, he constitutes democratic nobility. And by that, what I mean is a high level of spiritual excellence, intellectual sharpness. Harvard PhD, one of the first black person to get a PhD from Harvard, but also an unbelievable sensitivity and generosity in terms of public life. And that's what the legacy of Ella Baker is about. That's what the legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer is about. That's what the legacy of Miles Horton is about, and his blessed wife, Janet. But Dr. Janet Moses is also here, and we should acknowledge her because they are a dynamic duo. But my question has to do with the unbelievable challenge to this, both the party as well as the platform drafting committee. When you talk about people's power, and when you talk about the grounds upon which everyday people struggling for lives of decency ought to have trust in a Democratic Party, given the history that you laid out, even the recent history, the Democratic Party's complicity to mass incarceration regime, its complicity to undermining the welfare rights of everyday people. The relation of what you have done historically, continue to do in Mississippi, and the Black Lives Matter movement emerging these days in the age of Ferguson. What are the grounds in your own mind for having the kind of trust in the Democratic Party, given where we are at present, my dear brother?
So just to be truthful, the only grounds for me are actually what I think of as earned insurgencies that come from the bottom up, right? I think we have to earn our insurgencies in this country. That was our experience in Mississippi. We had to earn it in 3 different ways. First, we had to earn from the sharecroppers and the farmers that we were working with their trust. And it was really simple. Every time we got knocked down, we had to stand back up. And finally, they decided that we meant what we were saying. We also had to earn something from the national government. You remember the 1957 Civil Rights Act? Johnson was Senate Majority Leader and Eisenhower was President. And that set up the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Now, that act was about the idea that Tuskegee professors who qualified under any standard should be allowed to vote. They didn't have SNCC in mind, but they put in that act that anyone who was acting on behalf of the people trying to vote, that states could not arrest them. So that act gave SNCC a little, what I came to think of as a legal crawl space. It actually enabled us to do the work on the ground. So every time the state of Mississippi locked us up, the Justice Department came and got us out. But we had to earn their trust. It didn't say that they were required to do that. They were permitted to do that, right? And so we had to earn the right to be people that they would go to bat for. And then we had to earn the right to call on the country to come take a look at itself. We had to earn the right to call on college students from all over the country to come down in face of danger. And as you know, 3 of them were murdered that summer, right? And we had to earn the right to do that. So we need in this country earned insurgencies. That's what it will take, I think, to get the political parties, including the Democratic Party, up and moving on these issues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. Thank you. First, let me just thank you for being here today and for your testimony and putting our party and this movement in context, because oftentimes we forget the historical reasons for why we're here and how we got here. And I just have to personally thank you and what you have done just to pave the way for myself and others to get elected to public office. Had it not been for yourself and all of those in SNCC and the movement, we would never have been elected. So thank you very much. Secondly, I just want to ask you, as a Democrat, a progressive Democrat who embraces many of our movements on the outside, the Dreamers, the Black Lives Matter movement, all of the movements that are emerging, how do we make sure that our party embraces these movements and that these movements make sure that we're held accountable to the justice movement and to what we have to do to become a country that really is worthy of our children and our children's future in terms of the democratic and movements and democracy that we all embrace?
Yes, so I think that the party could engage with people who are trying to actually have meetings with those people you just named who are trying to start a movement. So it would be really helpful, I think. Cortland Cox is the sort of point person on the SNCC Legacy Committee. And I know that he is planning and trying to bring together people who are involved in those movements and to get people from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party involved in helping, because you need the voices of the people who are actually doing that work at the table.
Again, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for passing the baton on. My mother, who's 89, says that, you know, she's passing on the baton, but she said, don't drop it. And I promise you, we will not drop it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That. Thank you.